Okay, let's try this. Oh, cold. I'm getting over a cold. Someone in the family got tested with COVID, and the rest of us have been sick. It's basically just been I haven't got tested or anything, but it's just been like a flu, fortunately. The book is 1 Samuel chapter 15, chapter 16. I've heard this many times. I watched a video this morning. I watched a thing this morning talking about David and Goliath. And I think it was meant as an inspirational thing, which is fine. I'm not criticizing anyone's video because I think I know how this was meant. And a lot of people, especially Hollywood, does this, where they'll use the story of David and Goliath. David takes out the Philistine, the giant, as a like an act of courage. The little guy takes out the giant underdog kind of thing and all this. And I'm trying to think of a movie. There was a movie with Tommy Lee Jones, I think is what it was called. And they just completely butchered it. But it still came off as a inspirational type of thing. You got to stand up with courage and fight your battles and all that kind of thing. Talking about David against the giant. And I think I've made this point before. That is not what this is about, David and Goliath. It's not an underdog story. It's not about the little guy winning. Because in this story, David is the biggest, most powerful man in the world. If you read it, if you actually read the book, he's actually the most powerful human on the planet Earth at this point in time when he meets this Philistine. And he shows confidence the entire time. At no point is he, gosh, how am I going to get out of this? I'm in a corner. What am I going to do? I got to, pick myself up by the bootstraps and get some courage. None of that happened. None of that's in the story. He's very cocky the whole time. Okay? Because he does realize he's backed by the most powerful entity in all the world. So let me just pick up a couple of things here and throw them at you. We'll see what we can do. First chapter, this is 1 Samuel chapter 16. The Lord said to Samuel, this is God speaking to Samuel. God speaking, okay? How long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided myself a king among his sons. God is stating they're going to a king, one of God's kings, appointed, anointed kings. Okay? Then we're going to skip ahead here. The Lord said to Samuel, do not look at the appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. He takes David's brothers, and they're eyeballing each brother, kind of interviewing him for the position, and God's saying, And he says, do not look at his appearance, for at his physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So he's checking off the brothers. No, not this one, not that one. So he goes through, I think there's 3 or 4 brothers. Where is it here? Samuel said to Jesse, are all the young men here? He's running out of sons. And God said, you're going there for one of his kids. He says, are all the young men here? Then he said, there remains yet the youngest, and there he is keeping the sheep. And Samuel said to Jesse, send and bring him here, for we will not sit down till he comes here. Let's see. So he sent and brought him in, meaning brought David in. Now he was ruddy with bright eyes and good looking. And the Lord said, arise. Once again, God speaking. The Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is the one. Now, this is not, I don't believe this is a secret from David. This is, maybe it is. I don't think so. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. His brothers are watching this. And here it goes. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. Okay? This man is now in the Spirit, has a spirit, just like we talked about in John 14, 15, 16. This guy is armed and dangerous. Okay? He is representing and backed by the Almighty. You feeling sorry for him yet? I'm not knocking him. It's just a lot of people have this picture of the little guy, the little, poor little guy, got to go against the big, kind of thing. Let's see. And it talks about now Saul has his problem, and Dave gets out his fender and fires up the amp and makes him feel better, chases off the spirits. My interpretation there says, just so you know. And so it was, whenever the Spirit from God was upon Saul, tormenting him, that David would take a harp and play it with his hand, then Saul would become refreshed and well, and the distressing spirit would depart from him. You ever hear the song, I think it's Hallelujah by David Cohen? Makes me think of that. Now, the Philistines gathered, chapter 17, the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle. Let's see. And were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah. Let's see here. We're getting ready to see. Oh, yeah, the Valley of Elah. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the Valley of Elah and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath. This is the giant. The Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits. They tell you he's a really large, big, ominous-looking dude. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see, stood crying out. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, "Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we'll be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "I defy the armies of Israel. This day, give me a man that we may fight together." Okay. When Saul and all of Israel, all the men there preparing for battle, when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Think of that. They're scared of this dude. Okay? They are afraid. Let's skip the bread, the cheese, and blah, blah, blah. They got David catering the thing. Let's see here. Okay. So David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, and took the things, food, and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to the fight and shouting for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had drawn up in battle array, army against army. Let me see here. And then as he talked with them, there was the champion. I think they say champion here. It was the King James, I think, says the giant. Then as he talked with them, he talked to his brothers, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines, and he spoke according to the same words, so David heard them. Excuse me. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were dreadfully afraid. Same group, all of Israel. Oh my God, this dude's big. We're out here. Let's see. The men of Israel said, "Have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king, enrich him with great riches." Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to skip a lot of extra stuff here. No, it says here, now the words which David spoke were heard. They reported them to Saul, and he sent for him. Then David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him, because of this giant. Let no man's heart fail. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. He says, I'm going to go get him. Okay. Saul said to David, you are not able to go against the Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth. David says, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it, struck, and delivered the lamb from its mouth. When it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Apparently, the only person on the scene here that knows that God is who he is David. Everyone else they're big on this giant. Okay? Not really, you just have to think, they don't really think about this God of theirs. Or for whatever reason, they don't think they're being supported by this guy. David's got it. Okay? There's no fear in this kid. There's no reason to. Let's see here. Okay. The Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said, go, and the Lord be with you. Let's do one more thing here. He goes to the giant. The Philistine says today, come to me and I will give your head to the head. I'm sorry. He said to David, come to me and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with the sword. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. You can make an inspirational story out of it, the poor little guy, but that ain't David. Ain't nothing poor little about David. Most powerful man on the planet at that point. When people want, you got a big thing out against you, that's going to be your Goliath. Well, you better have God on your side. You better be one of his. Otherwise, you are going to be a sad little inspirational story that's going to take a lot of courage. I don't think this took much courage on David's part. On David's part. He was just obedient and also aware of who was backing his play. Okay, the little underdog story, that's not this. That's not this. I don't think they read the whole, or they get too much of a Hollywood version of it. Whereas the entire army of Israel, they were worried about the giant. And David was the only one that was worried about the God. So hopefully I made some sense there. And I don't mind if someone takes a David and Goliath thing and makes it inspirational for you, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But that's not what this story is about. David was a very, very powerful man at that point. You pity the giant. Live, God bless.